So easily the most important metric you're ever going to look at when you're doing product development or you're analyzing existing ASINs in your own portfolio is going to be ROI, or return on investment, which basically calculates if you take $1 into a product, how many dollars do you get back? Why this is super critical is that in a physical products business, you're always going to be buying product before you're actually able to sell it. And so you want to make sure that the profits, the net profits that are spinning off of a product that you're selling, is going to be enough to actually fund future inventory. And if you don't get these numbers right, it's incredibly difficult to scale and grow your physical products brand without using your own personal savings and without taking on an uncomfortable amount of debt. So I'll say this again. This is the most critical number you'll ever calculate, and make sure you're really thorough about it when you're going in the product development phase. Because if on paper, using conservative metrics, you can't get to north of 100%, you've got to kill the product and move on to another one. And when you're managing an existing product, which we're going to get into in the management module, it's equally important to see how these numbers shake out in reality. So we've built what I think is probably the most sophisticated and detailed, and in my opinion, accurate ROI calculator you're ever going to see. A lot of people have ROI calculators and they basically want to understand what their gross or net margins are and then figure that out into the actual ROI percentage. But what we've done here is we've actually taken the sales price and then we've figured out what the FBA costs are given the various lengths, width, height, and weight of the product. We then also have a calculator for referral fees. The standard default is going to be 15%, but there are different kind of categories that have different percentages. So you can select the category your product's in if you want to be sure, but most are going to be 15%. We've also got the average estimated number of months of storage, and it'll calculate costs there. We've got our COGS. So if we're in the product development phase, we're actually going to want to use the COGS that we start to get back from factories as we start to reach out to them and see an estimated COGS there. And then this is going to basically give us our total profit, gross margin, and ROI before any pay-per-click and returns. And that's where most people stop, if they even get that far. What we also want to look at is some of the economics of the product as well, because we want to know what our net, after all the cash outlay that we've got to make, not only product costs, but also investment in marketing and how many return rates we're going to get. We want to have those numbers as well. And we actually want to see a net of 100% or greater, even taking into account those numbers. So if we came down here to the estimated return rate, we can put that in for our product category. We can put in our estimated tacos, and you can use a like early stage tacos, or you can do like what you would expect your long running kind of 3, 4, 5 months into the product, what you'd expect those to be. So you can use a bunch of different estimates. And then that's basically going to give you the total profit and then the total ROI, or what I would call the true ROI, because that's what I want to care about is how much cash do I have left to reinvest into future inventory runs. So let's run through an example using the golf push cart. If we actually had an existing product here, what's really cool about this is we can actually just copy and import in our fee preview report from Amazon here, and it'll basically upload all of our ASINs, and then this thing will basically create all of that data here for us in these vertical columns. But since we're in the product development stage and we don't actually have an ASIN yet, we don't have the actual dimensions and all those other things, we're going to kind of estimate them based on other ASINs, based on feedback we've gotten from our Alibaba factory evaluation. So what I like to do when I'm doing this, I like to try to find a product that's going to be a similar size to the one that I'm looking at creating. So we don't know the exact size and weight, but this one's got some bigger wheels, seems pretty hefty, so it's probably going to have a similar weight and size to the one that we're looking at. And then there's basically this helium 10 thing that pops up here if you've got helium 10. I just go to the estimate profitability here, and then I'm basically just going to copy these dimensions in right here. So there's going to be the length, the width, there's the height, and this bad boy weighs 19.15 pounds. I hit enter, and then it's automatically calculated the small oversize, which is going to have a fee from Amazon of $24.24 to ship it to end customers. The next step, again, you can kind of select your actual category. I usually just leave it at default unless I believe I'm in a category with lower fees. We're going to assume that we're going to be spitting in 3 months worth of inventory at a time, even if it's drip feeding from our 3PL. And this 679 is basically going to be the average storage per unit for 3 months for a given period. So we'll plug that in. So let's say that you haven't actually reached out to factories and gotten some definitive negotiations yet, and we're just kind of scratching the surface to see if this product makes sense. What we can do here is just kind of scan through here on Alibaba and get a rough estimate of what the cost might be. So it looks like the cheaper ones are like, call it 40 to 45 bucks. Some of these bigger ones start to get in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's a really expensive one, which is an electric one. There's some smaller cheap ones that are like 20. So it looks like we're probably going to be like, I would say in the 70s. So let's just go ahead and plug in a $70 fee here for the cost and just see where that gets us. We put in 70. And let's say that our steady state post-launch price that we're anticipating is going to be $299. What that basically says is boom, we're in the money. This is actually awesome ROI, assuming that we can get those COGS and assuming we could sell for that price. But again, that's before returns and pay-per-click, which is this is the number that most people are going to look at. What I like to do is look at the return rate. Most return rates on average are probably going to be about 3%. If you get into electronics categories or some more complex categories, it's not uncommon to have 10, 12%. The most that I've seen on my products is about 8%, but our average is going to be in that 3 to 5% range. Let's just be conservative here and say that it's going to be 5%. And then you want to estimate what your tacos is. I would say at a minimum for your first year of a product, it's going to be around 10% if you're really operating well. But again, if you want to be conservative and just say, hey, it's probably going to be a little bit harder going to get this optimized and get the reviews up, let's just say it's 15%. So what this basically leaves us with is a net ROI of 133% or a profit of $93.32 per golf push cart that we actually sell. This is fantastic information to know because if these numbers shake out like they do and we're able to effectively sell at $299, we're basically in the money at that point and we're clearing ROI after all of our ad spend and after return rates. Again, most sellers are going to look at this 219% and think that they're really in the money, but we like to be way more realistic and conservative, make sure that our ROI is north of 100% given all these variables. The other thing that we can do here is we can play with some different price points and just see, hey, if we ended up having to do discounts or whatever, okay, we're still right above the line here. Let's say I went down to $250 and I had to do a real sale. You can see I actually dip below the ROI. So I also get a barometer of, hey, if I'm not able to sell at my target price, what's my next case scenario and what's my worst case scenario? We want to try to have our worst case scenario still be close to 100% if we can, because at least at that point we could do a production run or two, and if we decide to kill the product, if we can't improve things, we can kill the product. So you don't want this to be like where it's right on the line only if you hit this perfect case where you're selling it for the exact price you want. You want to have a little bit of variability in there because you can't always predict every element of this thing. So we're going to use this thing religiously when we're developing products and determining which ones we want to go for because we want to have the maximum ROI possible. How I typically like to set this up is to have one that's basically for product development, product research. So as we get different ideas, like this one, I probably put just golf push cart. And let's say I analyze like 10 ideas. I keep them all here actively before I decide to kill them or move forward with them. And then I'll have a separate ROI calculator that will actually have all of our actual products in here, which will be based on this actual fee preview report. So it's real data from Amazon. And what we can do with that is if our factory costs change, if any of our shipping costs change, things like that, we can evaluate that ROI as our cost dynamics shift, as our real return rates come in, as our actual tacos come in. And we basically have an active portfolio that we're managing ROI on a regular basis. So use this tool. I think it's one of the most detailed and effective that I've ever seen for the space. I think it's going to be a huge benefit for both assessing product opportunities and then assessing your existing portfolio. That's the ROI calculator.